Hi friends, I'm Chelsea Grayson coming to you once again from the Office of the CEO. This is my show where I can help you be more successful in your current career, or I can help you successfully transition to a new career. So today I'm going to be giving you my top 10 tips for how to avoid or correct a mistake that you've made at work or in your career path generally. Here's number one. Make sure you communicate early if you've made a mistake at work. It never does anybody any good to hold it, to keep it secret from your boss, to try to correct things behind the scenes. They're always going to find out. And by the way, you're never going to be able to correct it to their satisfaction. They always will have wanted to participate in the corrective plan of action. So as painful as it is, the minute you figure out you've made a mistake, sit back, see if you can at least come up with a plan of corrective action. And if you possibly can, try to assess what the negative impact could possibly be from the mistake that you've made. And armed with all of that, as soon as humanly possible, go to your boss and communicate the mistake. So I'm going to give you an example from my own career. As many of you know, I was a lawyer for about 20 years before I went on to be the CEO of the two companies that I ran. And early on in my legal career, although I was a deal lawyer, every once in a while you actually have to file transactional documents with the court, particularly if you're dealing with transactions that are happening in the context of a bankruptcy. There's always a judge involved. So I was working with a lawyer who had asked me to prepare a couple of pleadings to be filed in court that would memorialize some transactions that we had done for our clients. These were actually very simple pleadings, and they were really just notifications that certain transactions had happened. Now, the case was a little bit complicated because we were representing a couple of different related clients. And so we had to file pleadings about the same deal in various different cases, all simultaneously. And the partner that I was working for very specifically instructed me. She said, look, I know you can handle doing these pleadings. It's literally, child's play for you. She said, but I do want to see all three of these pleadings before they get filed with the court. So I said, of course, no problem. Now, I was totally overwhelmed with all sorts of other projects that I was working on. Again, I was a very young lawyer as well. None of these are excuses. This is just background for you. And I prepared these three pleadings and I got them done. And I was so happy to get them ticked off my list that before I even thought about it, I was just so eager to get these things actually filed so that I could totally get them off my plate and move on to one of my other projects. I called my paralegal in. I said, go ahead, these are ready. I've signed them. Go ahead and file them. And she went ahead and filed them. And finished my work up for the day, went home, woke up in a cold sweat at about 3 o'clock in the morning. Oh my gosh, Dulcie said she really wanted to see those pleadings before they got filed. But I calmed myself down and got myself back to sleep, just thinking, well, again, these were very basic pleadings. I'm sure that they're fine. So I'll just let her know tomorrow morning that, oops, I filed them and I'm really sorry, but all is good. Well, horror of horrors, I went in the morning and took a look at the pleadings and realized I actually had made a horrible mistake. I had filed two of the pleadings for the same client instead of filing each of the pleadings for different clients. Remember, I told you we had multiple clients. So now I had a couple of different mistakes, and now I had to go talk to her about how the fact that my first mistake, which was specifically forgetting her instructions to me, had led to the second mistake, which surely she would have caught had she seen the pleadings, which is exactly why she wanted to review them before they were filed, right? So I went and I fell on my sword with her right away that very day and wasn't sure if I was going to get fired, if she was going to make some sort of a report in my HR file or what. But I went to her very specifically and said, but I've talked to the litigators and they said, this is how we can file a corrective pleading. They actually haven't been served on anybody yet, so we can choose not to serve those pleadings and we can just serve the corrected pleadings, and that's the only thing that anybody on the other side or all the parties in the case are going to see. And this is really just a technical or clerical error, so this is not likely to have any negative impact on the case or on our deals for sure. So I did that, and after she got done with, she definitely blew up at me. Her blood pressure rose, and she was a hothead anyways. But it took her a minute to simmer down, and once she got past the heat of passion, then she agreed with my course of corrective action. We moved on, and we actually worked together for many, many years after that, and she was one of the people who wrote a memo in support of me making partner about 10 years later. So That's thing number one, communicate early, but always come with a plan. So number two, even if you screw up and you fail to communicate right away, or you don't mend fences right away, please know that it's never too late to mend fences. So a girlfriend of mine was given a promotion at work after she assured her superiors that she was in it for the long haul, that she really believed in the long-term mission of the company. Once she got the promotion, it attracted all sorts of interest on LinkedIn. A competitor reached out to her. They offered her a better gig for more money. She really had no choice but to take it for her own personal career path, but she went about it all wrong back at her current job that she, of course, had to resign from, and didn't do it in a very elegant or classy way, sort of skipped out on them, didn't give them the right amount of notice, and also didn't really come forward and apologize, and say, look, I really meant what I said when you gave me the promotion about being here in the long term, but this happened. I'm sorry I didn't give you an opportunity to make me a competitive offer against the offer that I received from the other company. I did this. I know it wasn't the right way to do it, and I'm really sorry. She didn't do any of that. She just sort of left them in a lurch. But about a year later, she really had thought about it for so long and realized that she really didn't want those bridges to be burned permanently. So she wrote a letter and sent it to her two former bosses at the previous job, apologizing profusely, falling on her sword. She recognized all of the things that she had mishandled and how she wished she would have handled them better, and asked them to please accept her apologies. And you know what? They both picked up the phone. They did accept her apologies. And ultimately, much later on, they all ended up working at another organization together. And they all worked very well as a team. So it's never too late to mend fences. Don't think that you've permanently wrecked a relationship if you didn't perform perfectly the first time around. So my number 3 tip is never overpromise. This is also called managing expectations. We're all very eager to take on everything that our boss gives us because we want to perform so well for them, and we want to impress them, and we want to show them that we're ready for a promotion or a raise or a bonus or whatever. Or, for example, if we have our own companies or we're representing a company and we're pitching for new work, we're trying to develop business, we're all very eager to overpromise for some big project that we really know in our gut is a little bit beyond what our capabilities are, but we really want that gig because it would mean so much for the resume. It would mean so much for the marketing of your business, what have you. This is never a good idea, because typically what's going to happen if you've done this unrealistically, if you've overpromised, you're going to disappoint. You're not going to be able to have all the resources to provide a successful outcome. You're going to miss things. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to miss deadlines. And this is just going to piss the person off, because they could have easily either picked someone else or asked you to be on somebody else's team so you could learn from them. And by now the project would have been done, and it would have been done right. But instead what you've done, you've wasted X number of days or weeks, and now they've got to pay somebody to correct all of your mistakes, and they've lost all of this time. So don't ever overpromise. Be very realistic about what your capabilities are, or about what your team's capabilities are. So again, that's also called managing expectations. Now, on the flip side of that coin, also within tip number 3 is always overperform. I hope this goes without saying. Whatever project you're assigned that you take on, whatever business that you've pitched that you actually get, exceed expectations every single time. You absolutely should kill yourself on every assignment, every project. Always, always overperform for a client or for your boss. There's never an excuse just to sort of lollygag your way through something because ho-hum, it's just part of your daily routine at work. This is just another of the same project that you've been getting day in and day out. Make every project your best performance. So number 4, understanding your limitations, and this sort of dovetails into the last point that we just made on number 3, understanding your limitations. You should always take on extra work, even just a little bit outside your job description. This is so that once you get to your annual performance evaluation, you'll be able to marshal a list of the extra projects and extra work that you took on. And so then you can legitimately ask for whether it's a promotion or a raise or a bonus or some other benefit. Now, of course, if you don't start seeing direct benefits from taking on extra work, I would never want you to just do extra work for free, right? Or for nothing. So if it's been a full year and you've cycled through and you've been through your performance evaluation and you haven't seen a direct benefit, then you maybe need to step back and reevaluate, A, is this really the right place for me if they don't recognize the value of extra work? But also B, well, if they don't recognize the value of extra work, but I really do like this gig and I like this company, I can stay, but I can modulate a little bit and not maybe do all of that extra work. But all of you, I advise all of you, it's always worthwhile to spend at least one performance review cycle taking on lots and lots of extra projects at work just to see how it can benefit you. 5, so if you do end up making a mistake at work, just move on. Allow yourself to move on without dwelling on that mistake. If you allow yourself to be taken over by the doubt and insecurities that can trickle down from having made a mistake at work, that is definitely going to impact both your current and your future performance, when this should just remain an isolated incident in the past, not in the current and not in the future. And it should remain an isolated incident in the past that most other people will have forgotten already, or they will forget ultimately. I'm not asking you to forget the mistake. Of course, you should always learn from mistakes. You should always get better from a mistake. That's the benefit of having made a mistake. You should always force yourself to get better from a mistake. And of course, never, ever, ever make the same mistake twice. That's totally unforgivable. But again, don't dwell on it and don't allow it to cause your current or future performance to be negatively impacted, because that's never going to help you. You already made the mistake. Don't make another one, right? So number 6, this is vital. Always, always be networking, and especially when you are at your busiest and most successful. If you only network when you're down, right? When you've slowed down, or when you need your next gig because you've lost your current gig, you're going to be working from a place of desperation, and people are going to be able to sense that at networking events like sharks can sense chum in the water. It's going to be just that simple. And you won't be very good at networking because you're coming from a deficit, right? So if you don't have anything going on, if you're slow or if you've lost your job, there's not going to be a lot to talk about when you're networking. If you're networking when you're busy, you will seem like the place to be. You will seem like the person to know, and you're going to build better and more connections. So again, always be networking, particularly when you're at your busiest and most successful. Number 7, please swallow your pride and make sure not to burn bridges. If somebody has wronged you in your career path along the way, it's okay to discuss that situation with the person and let them know, look, here's how I think that you wronged me. But at the end, make sure that you keep it amicable. If it can't be resolved, if they just won't agree that they've wronged you, if they aren't acknowledging it, if they aren't apologizing for it, keep it amicable. Just walk away and agree to disagree. Make sure you maintain that person as a connection. This is going to hurt your ego in the short term. I've been there many, many, many times. Your ego will suffer for it in the short term because it's going to feel like they won. They got one over on you. You haven't been able to exact the revenge that you would love to exact, or whatever it is. Long term, this is going to benefit you, not them. This will benefit you in the long term, not them. This is simply, and I hate to sound Machiavellian about it, but I'm going to sound Machiavellian about it. This is simply about using them to further your career at some unknown point in the future that you can't possibly predict right now. Trust me, you are going to need them in the future, whether it's because you directly are going to need a reference from them, or whether it's way behind the scenes, you're interviewing for something, you don't even know that the person you're interviewing with knows that horrible person from your history, but they're gonna have a side conversation and that person's gonna have something to say about you. So you don't know when it's gonna happen, you don't know how it's gonna happen. You'll need this person, you're gonna need to use them. Be friends with everyone in the end, even if it just kills you. Just go tell it to your therapist or something. So again, swallow your pride and don't burn bridges. My number 8 tip, if you figure out that you have taken the wrong job, work behind the scenes to correct the mistake. And I'll give you an example momentarily. But don't be vocal about your issues at that gig. A, there's lots of people who probably love their jobs there. They probably love that company, right? And B, you don't want them to fire you before you figure out what you're going to do. And once people in upper management start to hear that you're disgruntled, they're going to start thinking of ways to phase you out, even if it's not in their immediate conscience, right? They're going to start to not put you on projects, not give you raises, bonuses, whatever it is, promotions, because they really don't think that you're going to be here for the long term. Or they might just decide that we just don't want a disgruntled person here and they'll let you go. You should always choose whether or not you're at a company, right? So start to work behind the scenes, but don't vocalize your issues to anybody. You cannot trust anybody at work, none of your colleagues. They are all in competition with you. You're all being graded on a curve compared to everybody else, no matter what anybody says. So you cannot trust anybody at work when you start to voice issues that you've got. So pro tip also, when you're down because you've made a bad choice in your career path and you're starting to feel like, oh man, have I really doomed myself forever? You're trying to figure out steps. Open your mind and allow yourself to be flexible in that moment to new and different options that you might have not considered previously when you were flying high and doing great, right? When you thought that this was your career path forever, these are the things that are going to happen from this because this is going to be my career. Now you're a little bit thrown off. You're not sure. You're insecure about your ability to make the right decisions and judgments, right? This is exactly the time when you can really open your mind to all sorts of other totally alternative possibilities that might exist for you, because it's not going to get much worse than what you're currently doing, right? So let me give you an example about how this kind of mistake might actually lead to a whole new chapter in your career. So again, back to when I was a lawyer in the first part of my career, I was doing very well. I was a partner at the biggest law firm in the world. I was running the mergers and acquisitions group for the entire West Coast for the firm. And I decided in all of my wisdom, even though I could stay there and ultimately retire with the pension and the gold watch, I decided that I wanted to switch to a different firm that had a particular practice area that I didn't feel like my firm could offer to me, music and entertainment. I wanted to dabble a little bit in that industry because I live in Los Angeles and it's a local industry. So I switched to a different firm in the middle of the highest point in my career. I thought this was good for the long term of my career because I could now do this other practice area that this other firm couldn't afford me. I made a huge mistake. For sure, I started practicing in music and entertainment, but the culture of the firm was absolutely wrong for me. There was nobody there that I could relate to, align myself with. There was nobody that could partner with me there. I was really a very isolated island unto myself at that firm. Realized it right away. But I was at that firm for 2 years, so what was I doing that whole time? Well, first and foremost, I decided, wow, I need to get myself out of this particular office because there's people in the other offices around the world in this firm that I actually really like and that I think I could connect with. But none of them do exactly what I came to this firm to do. So I decided to totally switch gears, and I decided to partner up with one of my partners in the New York office and do renewable energy, which again was totally different from what I'd come to that firm to do. But I knew if we partnered up, it would take me on the road out of the Los Angeles office. And it did. I traveled all over Asia. So for the next 2 years, I traveled all over China, all over Japan. I traveled all over India. Some of my most memorable work-related trips were from that 2-year period, where I'd be miserable every time I'd get back to the LA office, but then I'd be back on another road trip to set up another renewable energy deal somewhere abroad, which is where most of those deals happen. Now, nobody at the firm knew. They just knew that I wasn't doing what I came there to do, but they were fine. I was making them money, and that was okay. Now, also behind the scenes, I knew this wasn't a good long-term option because I'm a single mother and I had my 2 children at home and I couldn't have my mother taking care of them for the rest of their lives, and I wanted to see them every once in a while. So I knew that long-term, this wasn't a good, viable option. So I started to build a way to get back to my old firm. And I ultimately had an offer set up to come back to my old firm that was going to start in about a month. So I had about a month before I was going to put my notice in, leave my current firm, and go back to my old firm. It was within that month that I got a phone call from the chairman of the board of American Apparel, asking me if I wanted to come join as the general counsel. And as you all know, ultimately, I became the CEO of that company. And she said to me, look, the company is close to filing for bankruptcy. There's a huge liquidity crisis. There's a culture crisis because we're going to have to terminate the CEO and founder because of some things that he's allegedly done from the Me Too perspective. So you're kind of coming into a disaster zone, but you have this real opportunity to fix things here and make it a viable company once again. And I was in such a vulnerable place. I was in a place where I was very unsure of my ability to make good career decisions. And I decided to take a leap of faith in that vulnerable moment and decided instead of going back to my old firm, I would veer completely to the right and do something I'd never even considered doing, which was going in-house to a company and going to a company that was in utter catastrophe. Best decision I ever made for my career. It catapulted me to a totally different part of my career. Again, I went on to be the CEO of that company. I sold that company. I went on from there to be the CEO of True Religion, which had common owners with American Apparel. And that has launched all of the board seats that I currently hold today. I'm not even a lawyer anymore, although I have my license, but I don't practice. So it was the best decision I made, but it was made during a point in time where I allowed myself to be vulnerable and flexible and open to other options. So tip number 9, always continue to invest in yourself and always try to get your organization to support you in that, whether financially or otherwise. A good employee, of course, is always going to prioritize the organization's short and long-term goals, but don't forget that you are also the CEO of a different organization. That is your career. You are the CEO of your career, as I've talked about in previous episodes. And all good CEOs focus on their own long and short-term initiatives for their own companies, right? So never forget to continue education, training, go to conferences, et cetera, and see if your company will back you and all of that, because it's good for them in the long run too. Don't forget about yourself. Finally, my 10th tip is always dress appropriately. So of course you want to see what the dress code is at your place of employment. And if you're working at a conservative law firm, it's going to be very different than if you're working at a surf shop, of course, right? Or if you're working as a server at a restaurant, that it's going to be very different from if you are the concierge at a big fancy hotel, whatever the case is. But understand what the dress code is, and within that dress code, be as formal as you possibly can be. Might not be as comfortable, and other people might tease you a little bit for, acting like you're, above everybody else because of the way you're dressing. Your superiors will see it. They will innately understand that you respect the organization and that you respect the process, that you respect them, and that you respect customers and anybody else that you outward face enough to be an elegant representation and representative of the company. And on a conscious or subconscious level, they will always take it in as a positive, and you'll ultimately get rewarded for it. You can almost never overdress anywhere that you are. You might come in and people might make a comment about how dressed you are, but ultimately they'll get used to it and they'll start to actually treat you with a lot more respect the more formally you're dressed. That really does happen. I want to make a very specific warning about casual Fridays. I hope it goes without saying. We don't wear flip-flops. We don't wear shorts. We don't wear our hair all messed up. You always come presentable. Always wear appropriate clothes. I didn't even do casual Friday. The last places that I was at that had casual Friday, I never even did that. I just dressed the exact same Monday through Friday because I really felt like people took a lot of terrible liberties, and it led to a lot of really inappropriate situations, because the more casually you dress, the more casually you act, the more casually people treat you. That's never good in a work situation. These are not your friends. These are your work colleagues. I repeat, they are not your friends. They are your work colleagues, even if you're friendly with them. You work with them. You will know them for the rest of your career. You need to command their respect. And of course, again, I hope it goes without saying, office parties or conferences that you go to where you're going to see work colleagues, these are also places where you really need to button it up and forget about trying to look sexy or cute or trying to be comfortable. That's just not what this context is for. So there you have it. Those are my top 10 tips for avoiding or correcting mistakes that you can make at work or in your career path. I hope this has been a helpful episode. Please be sure and drop me a comment and let me know what you thought. And please join me again for the next episode when I come to you from the office of the CEO.